It had been about 6 months since the phone calls from my mother had started, each one laced with a subtle tremor of worry. She would update me on my father's deteriorating health, the series of heart surgeries, and the haunting diagnosis of microvascular dementia and cerebrovascular disease that followed. With each passing conversation, the lines of concern on my face deepened, a stark reminder of the fragility of time and well-being. As I contemplated this decision, I couldn't help but reflect on the stark contrasts between my life in the city and the challenges my family faced back home. My days were filled with the frenetic pace of software development, the thrill of coding sprints, and the allure of tech trends. In stark contrast, the rhythms of suburban life had become foreign. The quiet evenings and the subtle sounds of a household that breathed with the lives of its inhabitants now seeming almost alien to me. Yet, the pull of my family's needs outweighed the siren call of the city lights. The silent promise I had made to myself years ago, standing in the modest backyard of my childhood home, gazing up at the stars, now demanded to be kept. I knew with a certainty that rooted itself deep within me that I needed to return, to be there in ways that phone calls and weekend visits simply couldn't cover. As I began to plan for this reorientation of my life's priorities, each item I placed into a box, a book, a photo, a souvenir from a tech conference, became a tangible reminder of the journey I was about to undertake. This was not just a change of address, but a fundamental shift in the way I approached my responsibilities. I was trading potential career advancements for the opportunity to give back in the most meaningful way possible, to be a pillar of support for those who had shaped me into the person I had become. The day I maneuvered my sedan into the familiar driveway, the crunch of gravel under the tires felt like a metaphor for the uneasy reintroduction to a life I once knew. Stepping out, I was greeted by the sight of my mother, her smile warm but worn, the kind that spoke of countless worries weathered over the years. As she wrapped me in an embrace, I felt the desperation in her grip, her silent way of conveying that she needed help without uttering a word. The atmosphere inside the house was thick with the scent of nostalgia, mingled with an undercurrent of tension. My sister stood in the kitchen, a half-smile playing on her lips as she juggled making dinner and entertaining my young nephew, Ethan, whose boundless energy provided a stark contrast to the heaviness that permeated the air. Our greetings were brief, a stilted exchange that belied the deeper currents of concern we all felt but dared not voice. In the days that followed, I found myself in a delicate dance of recalibrating roles within our family dynamics. My mother continued to work her hours, unyielding despite the added emotional load, while my father's interactions with us had changed profoundly. Once a lively storyteller, his conversations now lost their thread, his frustrations palpable as he grappled with the gaps in his memory. Observing him, I saw flashes of the man who had taught me to ride a bike, the one who could fix broken appliances with a magician's ease. Now he struggled to remember names, faces, and dates. The impact on my mother heartbreaking, as she oscillated between being a caring spouse and a weary nurse, her face etching deeper with lines of sorrow with each passing day. My sister's reaction to my return was a mix of relief and resentment. At first, there was an undeniable sense of gratitude, an extra pair of hands to help, a reprieve from her role as the primary support. But as the days passed, old grievances surfaced, and we clashed not just over small mundane things like household chores or schedules, but about deeper issues. Resentments about my choice to move away and pursue my career came to light, her words slicing through the fragile peace. "You left just when things were getting tough," she accused one evening, her voice laced with a pain that I had never fully understood. "And now you just come back, expecting to fix everything." These confrontations were painful, but necessary. They opened up dialogues long overdue, about our roles in this family, about support and sacrifice. It was through these difficult conversations that we began to navigate our new reality, not just as individuals living under one roof, but as a cohesive unit facing a crisis together. Amid the turmoil and adjustments, my bond with my young nephew, Ethan, became a source of joy and escape. His innocence and unbridled enthusiasm for life reminded us all of the simpler joys that can sometimes be lost in the midst of adult responsibilities and concerns. I found myself becoming his little shadow, answering his endless questions and finding solace in his laughter, which provided a much-needed balm on the roughest of days. As the weeks turned into months, my role within the family began to solidify. I found myself balancing my remote work with attending doctor's appointments with my father, discussing financial strategies with my mother, and providing moral support to my sister. The shift was palpable. Where once I was just a visitor in their lives, I had become an integral part of the household's daily rhythm. One evening, as my mother and I sat on the porch watching the sun dip below the horizon, she turned to me, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I'm so glad you're here," she whispered. "It's been hard, harder than I ever let on, but having you here makes it feel like we can manage this, like we're not alone in it." Her words struck a chord within me, and I realized then that my return was not just about providing financial or physical support. It was about healing, about mending the frayed threads of our family fabric. It was about showing up, not just in times of crisis, but every day, proving through my actions that family, with all its imperfections and challenges, was worth every sacrifice. The transition back home was not without its difficulties. There were moments of profound connection and understanding, but also heartache and misunderstandings. Learning to navigate the new rhythms and routines of suburban life after the fast-paced energy of the city was a continual adjustment. Seeing my father's empty chair at the dinner table on the days when his condition was particularly troubling was a gut-wrenching reminder of the changes we were all grappling with. In an effort to aid in my father's care, I introduced technology that I hoped would bridge the gap between his needs and my ability to meet them. The AirPods Pro I purchased for him connected him to his favorite music and shows, providing comfort when the confusion of dementia clouded his mind. More significantly, I gifted him my Apple Watch Series 8, equipped with health monitoring features, a crucial tool in tracking his heart's behavior, particularly its ability to detect atrial fibrillation, a condition we now watched meticulously. The emotional toll of this transition was heavy, and the joy of being close to my family again was often overshadowed by the realities of my father's declining health. Each doctor's visit, each small sign of worsening, served as a reminder of why I had returned, and I found myself spending countless hours researching ways to enhance his quality of life, from dietary changes to cognitive exercises that might slow the progression of his dementia. As I sat in the quiet of the house one evening, the usual hum of conversation fluttering nervously around mundane topics, I found myself restless, my mind refusing to quiet. Deciding to tinker with some of the tech gadgets I had brought for my father, I began to explore the features of the Apple Watch, hoping to distract myself from the overwhelming emotions that had been weighing me down. It was during this tinkering that I stumbled upon something that would shatter the fragile peace we had been trying to maintain. As I navigated through the menus, I noticed that the watch needed resetting. The screen lit up with too many notifications for my father to have possibly managed on his own. Curiosity piqued. I ventured into the Messages app, and that's when I discovered the recently deleted folder, its entries hinting at a troubling secret that had been hidden from our family. The messages I found in the recently deleted folder were not just surprising. They were shocking. The texts were not from family members or old friends, but from an unknown number, discussing arrangements and meetings with an unsettling familiarity and explicitness. As I read through them, a cold wave of disbelief washed over me, followed by a sharp pang of betrayal. My father, the man who had taught me the values of honesty and integrity, was leading a secret life that was now laid bare before me. The content of the messages made it clear that he had been communicating with a prostitute broker, and the implications were staggering. I sat there, the watch heavy in my hands, struggling to reconcile this image with the father I thought I knew. Driven by a need to understand the full extent of this betrayal, I logged into his brokerage account, which he had shared access with me years ago for emergencies. What I found only deepened the chasm that was opening up inside me. The account, which should have held close to $100,000, was now down to $66,000. The transaction history showed several withdrawals of $3,000 each over the past year, coinciding with the dates mentioned in the deleted texts. This wasn't just a moral transgression, it was a financial betrayal that affected our entire family. The money in that account was supposed to be part of my parents' retirement fund, crucial for their care, especially given my father's health condition. Yet, it had been siphoned away to fund clandestine meetings that shattered the facade of the life we had been living. The room felt like it was spinning as I pieced together the full scope of my father's deception. I sat alone with this information well into the night, the glow from the laptop screen casting shadows on the walls. The weight of what I had discovered felt overwhelming, not just in its immediate impact, but in what it meant for the future. How could I confront my father about this? What would this revelation do to my mother, who had already borne so much? And what of my sister and nephew, who lived under this roof, innocent and unaware of the storm that was brewing? The night's revelations hung heavily in the air, tainting the familiar comfort of my old bedroom. As I lay there, staring at the ceiling, I grappled with a whirlwind of emotions, from anger and betrayal to an overwhelming sense of desolation. Growing up, my father had been my hero, the one who taught me to ride a bike, to respect others, and to stand up for what I believe in. But as I grew older, I had witnessed the facade crumble, his relationship with my mother fraught with tension and discord, his financial decisions made with little regard for our family's stability. My mother, in stark contrast, had been the pillar who bore the burdens, working tirelessly yet never allowing herself the luxury of even the smallest indulgences. The strain had become unbearable in my early 20s, and I had issued an ultimatum: resolve the issues or face losing me. Looking back, it had only served to deepen the divide, especially with my mother, who felt caught in an impossible situation. Now, sitting in the dim light of my city apartment, the chaos of my thoughts amplified by the dull roar of the urban landscape, I found myself plagued by uncertainty and remorse. I pondered the irony of how I, who had returned home to mend and care, had fled when the reality of my family's imperfections became too stark to bear. I'm struggling with the dichotomy of my emotions. On one hand, my father's actions are indefensible, a reckless endangerment of our family's stability and my mother's sacrifices. On the other, he is still my father, the man who, despite his flaws, played a crucial role in who I am today. How do I reconcile these two sides? How do I balance the scales of justice and filial duty? I remember my mother's words from years ago, after I had issued my ultimatum: "We all have our demons and disappointments, but we don't have to carry them alone." Her words echo in my mind now, a reminder that perhaps abandonment is not the solution, but a continuation of a cycle of hurt. Tomorrow, I will call my mother. I will not offer excuses for my abrupt departure, but I will listen. I will try to understand her side of this lifelong partnership that has borne so much strain. Perhaps, through these conversations, we can begin to forge a new path forward, not just for her and me, but for our entire family. For now, I sit alone with my thoughts, the city outside unaware of the turmoil within. But I am resolved not to let this night pass without reaching out, without trying to mend what has been broken. For in the end, family is not just about the good times shared, but also about navigating the storms together and emerging, perhaps a little battered, but whole.